Harley-Davidson just revealed its 2026 lineup, and on the surface, it looks revolutionary. Lower prices, bold promises, and headlines screaming accessibility. But dig deeper and it's not what it seems. What they didn't tell you could ruin the brand's legacy. Watch till the end. You'll see why you shouldn't want one. What's happening? Harley-Davidson stunned the motorcycle world when it announced that for 2026 it would sell a brand new bike for under $6,000. On the surface, that number sounds like salvation. A Harley for the price of a mid-level sport bike? A chance for thousands of riders who had been priced out of the brand to finally walk into a dealership and leave with keys in hand? The headlines seemed almost too good to be true. And of course they were. The so-called Harley-Davidson Sprint is positioned as a budget-friendly machine, but anyone who has followed the company knows that Harley does not do cheap without consequences. At $5,999, which will almost certainly become $6,000 once fees and markups are factored in, Harley is walking a tightrope. A bike priced this low cannot possibly carry the build quality, iconic V-twin feel, and enduring reliability that gave Harley its reputation. What it can carry is plastic bodywork, outsourced components, and the hollow echo of a nameplate slapped on for marketing appeal. For longtime fans, the danger is not only that the Sprint will disappoint as a product. The deeper problem is that it chips away at Harley's identity. A Harley has always been more than a machine. It is a symbol of rebellion, community, and pride in craftsmanship. Selling one that looks and feels like an imitation risks undermining the very DNA that separates the brand from the pack. Cheapening the badge for the sake of a headline price may lure a few curious buyers in the short term, but it alienates the riders who have carried Harley through decades of ups and downs. The Sprint is not just an experiment in pricing. It is a warning sign that Harley believes survival means turning itself into something unrecognizable, and that danger is far bigger than a single model. Because the real problem isn't the price, it's who Harley thought would buy this thing. Is Harley making the right move here or completely losing its identity? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you're finding this breakdown eye-opening, hit that like button so more riders can join the conversation. The youth obsession that never worked. For years, Harley has been obsessed with chasing younger riders. Marketing executives talk endlessly about courting Gen Z and millennials, spinning visions of 20-somethings falling in love with the brand. But the truth is painful. Younger riders do not want Harleys, and Harley's attempts to win them over have failed again and again. The Street Series was supposed to be a gateway. Instead, it gathered dust in showrooms and quietly disappeared. The X Series, used in training schools, barely registers as part of Harley's identity. The company keeps knocking on the same locked door, and every time it is met with silence. The reality is cultural. For riders in their late teens and 20s, motorcycles are about adrenaline, speed, and affordability. Sport bikes and naked bikes dominate their garages, not cruisers with heavy frames and decades of baggage attached to the brand. Harley has always been a company that you grow into, not one that you start with. The leather jackets and long rides across state lines appeal when you have the money, freedom, and maturity to embrace them. Forcing Harley onto an audience that is not ready simply creates resentment on both sides. Worse, Harley's fixation on youth makes it look desperate. The brand that once embodied rebellion now seems like the aging rock star begging teenagers to still think it's cool. Each failed attempt deepens the disconnect, proving that Harley cannot win affection by pandering to a group that fundamentally does not care. The Sprint is the latest and loudest chapter in this obsession, and its likely failure will be one more black mark on a strategy that should have been abandoned years ago. And to chase a fantasy market, Harley betrayed its most loyal riders. If you still want gear that lasts longer than the hype, we've prepared a list of trusted motorcycle accessories and essentials. Check the description. The Sportster's murder. For decades, the Sportster was Harley's gateway. The Iron 883 in particular became a cultural icon, offering an authentic Harley experience at a price point that was attainable. It looked like a Harley, it sounded like a Harley, and it rode like a Harley. Young riders bought them as their first cruiser. Older riders bought them as second bikes, and dealerships could barely keep them on the floor. The Iron 883 was not just another model, it was the heartbeat of Harley's connection to everyday riders. Then, in one of the most baffling decisions in company history, Harley killed it. The decision was justified with talk of emission standards, modernization, and moving the brand forward, but to customers it felt like betrayal. Overnight, the most accessible, most beloved Harley was gone, replaced by water-cooled machines that looked foreign and felt stripped of soul. Riders who had grown up dreaming of buying an iron were told that dream no longer existed. The entry point into the Harley family had been ripped away. The loss of the Sportster did more than create a hole in the lineup. It signaled that Harley was willing to discard heritage for the sake of chasing trends. The Iron 883 had proven demand and it had proven cultural weight. Eliminating it to replace it with bikes that carried higher price tags and less identity severed Harley's connection with the very people it should have been nurturing. It told loyalists that their loyalty no longer mattered, that the company valued image over authenticity. And those replacements would only get worse when you look at who Harley ignored. The bike dealers didn't want. The launch of Harley's entry-level bikes revealed something extraordinary. Even Harley's own dealers didn't believe in them. Walk into a small-town showroom and ask a salesperson about the Street Series, and chances are you'd be met with a sigh or a shrug. These were motorcycles with Harley badges that didn't feel like Harleys, and the very people responsible for selling them knew it. Dealers quietly admitted that the bikes were awkward to move. They lacked the soul that Harley loyalists expected and the excitement that might attract newcomers. To many in the Harley network, these machines were nothing more than orphans in the lineup. For a company like Harley, where dealerships are more than just retail outlets, but also cultural hubs, dealer enthusiasm is everything. A Harley store is supposed to feel like an extension of the brand's mythology. Chrome gleaming under fluorescent lights, leather jackets lining the racks, staff who live and breathe the biker lifestyle. The Street Series undercut that aura. Dealers didn't know how to frame them, who to target, or how to justify their existence. It was as if the brand's own ambassadors were embarrassed by what they had been handed. The irony is sharp. Harley has long touted the strength of its dealer network as one of its competitive advantages over foreign rivals. But when the company rolled out bikes that even its sales force did not want to sell, that advantage turned into a liability. Instead of rallying the faithful, Harley's strategy fractured the trust inside its own ranks. And once that internal faith begins to erode, the damage spreads outward fast. But rejection wasn't just cultural, it was financial. Luxury prices for budget bikes. Step into a dealership today and you'll discover one of Harley's most glaring contradictions. The so-called starter Harleys carry price tags that rival or even exceed full-size cruisers from Japanese competitors. A Honda Rebel 500, a Yamaha Bolt, or even Kawasaki's Vulcan can be bought at thousands less than a comparably equipped Harley. The result is as predictable as it is devastating. Customers walk into Harley showrooms curious, and they walk out empty-handed, heading down the street to a competitor where their money stretches farther. This is the direct consequence of Harley's build fewer, charge more strategy. The idea was to create scarcity and maintain exclusivity by limiting production. Instead, it pushed prices higher and made the brand inaccessible. For decades, Harley thrived because it had motorcycles at every level, giving riders a ladder to climb as their budget grew. Now that ladder is broken. The entry rungs are either missing entirely or priced so high that the climb feels impossible. In a world where discretionary spending is tightening and financing terms are tougher, Harley's gamble on exclusivity looks increasingly reckless. Riders don't just calculate horsepower and chrome, they calculate monthly payments. And when those numbers show that a Harley starter bike costs more than a fully capable competitor with a bigger engine and more features, the decision is easy. Harley loses. Again. And the buyers Harley ignored were the ones who could have saved it. The forgotten over 30 rider. Here's the truth Harley refuses to admit. The people who can actually afford to buy new motorcycles are not teenagers or 20-somethings. They are riders in their 30s and 40s, often with stable jobs, established credit, and the means to add a second bike to the garage. This group has been the backbone of motorcycle sales for decades. They are the ones who fell in love with sport bikes in their 20s, but are now ready for a cruiser, a touring bike, or a machine that feels like part of a lifestyle rather than a weekend thrill. Yet Harley, in its obsession with being young, has largely ignored this demographic. It is a tragic irony. The very riders most likely to buy are the ones who feel most neglected. Imagine being in your mid-30s, financially comfortable, looking for your first Harley, and discovering that the company's focus is on courting college graduates with beginner-friendly plastics. That is not just a missed sale, it is a missed opportunity to cement loyalty for decades. Other brands have stepped into this vacuum with precision. They understand that 30-somethings are aspirational buyers who want style, reliability, and affordability. They are not looking for entry-level compromises, they are looking for authentic experiences at attainable prices. Harley once owned this space with the Iron 883 and other mid-tier models. By abandoning that role, the company turned its back on the customers who were most eager to embrace it, and those riders didn't wait around. They went to Yamaha, Honda, and Kawasaki. The Metric Coup. While Harley chased after uninterested younger riders, its rivals quietly built empires. Japanese and European manufacturers flooded the market with affordable cruisers that offered reliability, strong performance, and attractive styling at prices Harley could not or would not match. Yamaha's V-Star 250, Honda's Rebel Series, Kawasaki's Vulcan, all of them carved out territory Harley once claimed as its own. These bikes became the natural first step for riders who might, in another era, have started with a Sportster. The brilliance of the Metric manufacturers was simple. They focused on value and availability. Riders could walk into a dealership, put down a modest deposit, and leave with a bike that looked sharp, rode well, and didn't require a lifetime of debt. Once those riders became loyal to Yamaha, Honda, or Kawasaki, they often stayed there, moving up the ladder within that brand rather than switching to Harley later in life. In other words, Harley didn't just lose an entry-level sale, it lost decades of potential loyalty. This slow-motion coup was not accidental. It was the result of Harley abandoning the middle of the market while competitors doubled down on it. By failing to compete where it mattered most, Harley allowed others to define what an affordable cruiser looks like. And now those rivals are reaping the rewards, building generations of riders who may never even consider Harley-Davidson. But Harley's nightmare wasn't just domestic. Overseas, it got even worse. Déjà vu from the 60s. History does not always repeat itself, but in Harley's case, it certainly rhymes. In the 1960s, the company faced a brutal flood of competition from European and Japanese motorcycles that undercut its prices and stole its thunder. Those small, affordable, and reliable bikes captured the imaginations of a generation of riders who could not afford Harley's heavy iron. Harley nearly collapsed under the weight of that invasion, saved only by a combination of desperate corporate maneuvers and government intervention. Fast forward to 2025, and the parallels are uncanny. Once again, Japanese and European brands dominate the entry-level market with models that are more affordable, more reliable, and more appealing to new riders. Once again, Harley finds itself on the defensive, trying to justify higher prices and a fading sense of identity. The Sprint may carry echoes of the old Italian-built Sprint of the 1960s, but the truth is harsher. Harley is replaying the same mistakes that nearly destroyed it 60 years ago. Back then, the company had an ace up its sleeve. It lobbied President Nixon for protection, securing tariffs that slowed the onslaught and gave Harley breathing room. Today, no such safety net exists. The global market is too interconnected, and the appetite for protecting a single motorcycle manufacturer simply is not there. Harley is fighting this battle alone, and its odds are far slimmer than they were in the past. But this time, there's no Nixon to bail them out. Tariffs that killed a legend. In February of 2025, the European Union dropped a bombshell on Harley-Davidson. A 50% tariff was slapped on American-built motorcycles, a retaliatory strike in a larger trade war that had nothing to do with bikes and everything to do with politics. The effect was instant and catastrophic. A Harley that retailed for 40,000 euros in January suddenly cost nearly 60,000 in February. In some countries, local taxes pushed the figure into 6 digits. Dealers across Europe were blindsided. Showrooms that once served as community hubs turned into museums overnight, with gleaming touring models sitting unsold like sculptures no one could afford. Even the most loyal Harley devotees balked at the price hikes. For many, it was not a question of desire, but of simple arithmetic. No one in their right mind would spend the equivalent of $124,000 on a motorcycle. The impact rippled across the Atlantic. Harley's European network, already struggling to maintain relevance, collapsed into paralysis. Pre-orders vanished. Dealer morale cratered, and the brand's reputation took yet another hit. What was framed as a temporary trade measure quickly became a symbol of Harley's vulnerability. The tariffs showed how fragile the company truly was, how quickly its empire could crumble when outside forces stacked the deck against it. And if Europe shut the door, the electric future slammed it shut. LiveWire's false salvation. Not long ago, Harley-Davidson pitched electrification as its path to salvation. The LiveWire project was supposed to prove that the company could adapt, innovate, and capture a new generation of riders with sleek, futuristic bikes. The marketing painted a picture of Harley reborn, relevant in a world moving towards sustainability. For a brief moment, optimism flickered. But the reality was far bleaker. The LiveWire was too expensive, too limited, and too disconnected from what riders actually wanted. High upfront costs kept buyers away. Range anxiety lingered, especially in countries without dense charging networks. And worst of all, the electric Harley did not feel like a Harley. It lacked the visceral rumble, the soul-stirring mechanics, the potato-potato heartbeat that defined the brand for a century. It was a technological experiment wearing a familiar logo, and riders saw through it immediately. Even generous subsidies could not mask the truth. When Japanese and European manufacturers began offering steep discounts on their internal combustion cruisers, LiveWire looked less like the future and more like an overpriced gadget. Sales stagnated. Dealers groaned, and Harley's attempt to ride the wave of electrification instead became another anchor dragging it down. And when the future turned bleak, Wall Street smelled blood. Showrooms of Debt. Behind the glossy marketing and global drama, the harshest reality of Harley's crisis is found on the showroom floor. Dealers operate on floor plan financing, borrowing money to fill their showrooms with inventory. Every motorcycle on display represents debt, and every month that passes without a sale adds interest to the dealer's burden. In good times, this system works. Bikes move quickly enough to cover the carrying costs. In bad times, it is a slow suffocation. 2025 has been nothing but bad times. Sales are down by more than 1/3 in many markets. Dealers who once relied on fast turnover now watch rows of unsold bikes gather dust, each one a financial liability growing heavier by the day. Some rotate the stock on the floor to create the illusion of new arrivals. Others quietly cut hours, lay off staff, or even dip into personal savings to stay afloat. The human toll is immense. Owners wake at night calculating whether to sell their buildings, wondering how long they can keep the lights on. Manufacturers may slash prices, but they cannot erase the debt already chained to these unsold machines. For many dealers, it is only a matter of time before covenants are breached and banks call in loans. Entire family-run dealerships that survived recessions and oil crises now teeter on the edge, crushed not by a lack of passion, but by a financial system designed to punish weakness. And as dealers suffocated, a bigger fight erupted in Washington. Motorcycles on the campaign trail. In states where motorcycles are woven into the cultural fabric, politicians have discovered a powerful stage, the Harley dealership. Governors and senators stand in front of rows of unsold bikes, cameras rolling, and deliver speeches about saving Main Street. They promise relief not for faceless corporations, but for the small businesses and workers who keep the industry alive. It is political theater at its sharpest, blending populist outrage with chrome and leather backdrops designed to tug at voters' hearts. The message is simple. Harley-Davidson is not just a company. It is a symbol of American grit, independence, and tradition. When a dealership closes, it is more than a business shuttering. It is a blow to the community, to local charities, to weekend rallies and summer parades. By tying themselves to Harley's fate, politicians position themselves as defenders of culture as much as defenders of jobs. But beneath the speeches lies another truth. Political promises rarely translate into meaningful change. Tax breaks and state-backed loans may offer temporary relief, but they do not fix the structural problems that plague Harley. The deeper crisis, overpriced bikes, disillusioned riders, global competition, cannot be solved with press conferences. Still, the optics are irresistible. For a candidate looking to connect with working-class voters, nothing looks better than standing in a Harley showroom and pledging to fight for our way of life. But politicians weren't the only ones mobilizing. The unions had entered the fight. Workers strike back. As sales collapsed and dealerships drowned in debt, the pain rippled back through the supply chain. Plants slowed production. Suppliers cut shifts. and thousands of workers who had built their lives around Harley-Davidson suddenly found themselves staring down layoffs. In January alone, union leaders estimated that more than 1,000 positions disappeared across factories and distribution hubs. For towns where Harley jobs were the lifeblood of the local economy, the impact was devastating. Unions responded with urgency. Leaders argued that Harley's problems were not just about business cycles, but about structural neglect, too much dependence on luxury pricing, too little investment in training and diversification, too much concentration of production in a handful of facilities vulnerable to global shocks. Workers rallied outside plants, waving banners and demanding that the company and lawmakers protect their livelihoods. For many, this was not only about paychecks, but about identity. Generations of families had worked the same assembly lines, built the same engines, and passed down the pride of craftsmanship. Losing those jobs meant more than losing income. It meant losing a connection to tradition. As the fight intensified, unions began lobbying Washington for relief, pressing for payroll subsidies, tax incentives, and retraining programs. They framed the crisis not just as a Harley problem, but as an American problem, a symbol of how fragile the manufacturing backbone had become. Even the unions couldn't stop what came next. And if you're serious about staying ahead of the biggest shifts in the motorcycle world, make sure you're subscribed. I've got more deep dives coming you won't want to miss. Wall Street's short game. To the financial world, Harley's pain looked less like tragedy and more like opportunity. Hedge funds began shorting shares of publicly traded motorcycle manufacturers, betting that the slump would deepen and profits would evaporate. Daily trading volumes spiked as speculators piled in, turning Harley's decline into a high-stakes casino game. What devastated workers and dealers became a jackpot for traders who thrived on volatility. Private equity firms circled the industry like vultures, eyeing distressed suppliers and vulnerable dealerships. Some investors quietly built positions in niche brands, betting they could scoop up assets cheaply and emerge stronger after consolidation. Others simply waited, convinced that bankruptcies would offer them bargains. For Harley itself, the pressure mounted. When pension funds and index funds began trimming their exposure, the message was clear. Wall Street did not believe in a quick recovery. This financial shift carried profound consequences. Harley's stock was no longer valued as an icon of Americana, but as a fragile relic, a plaything for speculators rather than a pillar for long-term investors. The shift from stability to speculation made the company's position even more precarious, with every earnings report treated as a referendum on its survival. And for Harley's loyalists, the final betrayal wasn't financial. It was cultural. The death of cool. For more than a century, Harley-Davidson was more than a motorcycle brand. It was a cultural symbol, shorthand for rebellion, independence, and freedom on the open road. Owning a Harley was never just about riding. It was about belonging to a myth. But by 2026, that myth was unraveling. The bikes were too expensive for many, too compromised for others, and too disconnected from their roots for nearly everyone. The greatest danger Harley faces is not bankruptcy, but irrelevance. A company can recover from debt, from tariffs, even from failed models. What it cannot recover from is losing its cultural resonance. If riders no longer see Harley as cool, as aspirational as the machine they dream of owning someday, then the brand becomes just another logo competing in a crowded market. And right now, that is exactly where Harley finds itself. Younger riders scroll past Harleys in favor of sleek sport bikes or quirky electrics. Older riders who once upgraded every few years now hold on to their machines longer, unwilling to pay inflated prices for bikes that no longer feel authentic. The image of Harley-Davidson, once the king of the highway, risks fading into nostalgia, remembered fondly but not desired. That is the true crisis. Not sales, not stock prices, identity. Because if Harley can't fix this, maybe nobody can. So, Harley's 2026 reveals may look exciting, but underneath the shine, the cracks are impossible to ignore. What do you think? Are they reinventing themselves or losing their soul? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button if this gave you value, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives on the motorcycle world.